First things first, this meeting is being recorded. We're in Zoom, as you can obviously tell. So we have all the functionality here. So there's the chat there, and mute and videos, all those options there. So we'll be doing the chat. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat here rather than the session chat. First of all, welcome to any newcomers to RDA or to this group, or newcomers to PIDS. I'm just going to share my screen for the agenda. So hopefully you can see that. And yep, should be showing now. So hopefully you're in the right session, because this is the National PID Strategies Working Group meeting. It's our first meeting following the Birds of Feather we had at the plenary 17. I'm co-chairing this with Natasha Simons. It's quite late for her, so thank you for being here. We're running this session again, but it's later for me, probably better for Natasha. So sharing the load a bit there. But we are looking for other co-chairs. So if anyone wants to volunteer, please feel free. Just go to the next slide. So yeah, it's quite a full agenda, and hopefully you've seen the link to the shared notes that's in the session, on the session page, and I'll put it in the chat in a minute. But I'm not good at multitasking, so I'm just going to go on. Oh, thank you, brilliant. I was hoping for volunteer. So yeah, so thanks everyone for attending and joining this group, all participants who've helped get this group established. We've got some presentations, as you can see there, but they're short progress updates, because we did quite a lot of updates in the Birds of a Feather we ran back in the plenary 17. So the idea was that we'd just sort of do shorter updates on what's changed and what's new since the earlier in the year. So then we're getting more into the discussions, because this is really about setting up the working group, which, as you probably have seen, isn't officially endorsed, although the case statement has been through a review from the Technical Advisory Board, and they came up with a couple of suggestions, which I'll talk about later anyway. So we've got the case statement, the working group page is established, but it isn't actually officially endorsed. But to me, I mean, I'm hoping, touch wood, that that's going to be quite straightforward. So this is really the start of the working group in the first meeting. So in that shared Google Doc, hopefully you've all got access to that now. There's relevant links in there, and also there's the participant list. So please feel free to add your name in there. And if you scroll down a bit further, there's also a landscape survey of countries where we're looking for any information: national PID policies, national PID infrastructures, funder infrastructure provider, institutional policies. It just seemed a good opportunity while everyone was here to gather as much information as we could. I mean, obviously we'll be doing that through the lifespan of the working group, but please add any information that would be useful there. And then right at the very end, there's the collaborative notes, which I'll try to do as well when I'm not talking. So as I mentioned, we are looking for some volunteers for additional co-chairs, just to share the load, and also volunteers to actively participate in the working group, where we're planning. I'll go through this a bit later with we'll go through the case statement, but a couple of sprints to month 6, because at the end of month 6 we are planning to deliver a guide. Like I said, I'll go through a bit more detail later. So anyone who wants to participate in that, please let us know. The outputs we're hoping can be used for adoption, and if there's any organisations that we can identify that can implement some of those recommendations and outputs, that'd be good. We're also looking for representatives from Africa, Asia. As you can see, that list is quite global north dominated, so we're looking for more global south or developing countries to be represented. So we're hoping that we can add to that list for the lifespan of the work group. So we only have an hour and a half now, some presentations. I'm going to go straight on with the progress updates. Unless anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask them. There's nothing in the chat, so I'll stop sharing that agenda and pass over to Natasha.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, seeing my screen now. All good? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a short update on what has been happening in Australia since the last plenary. And a special hello to Melroy Almeida, who's just joined us from the Australian Access Federation, because it's middle of the night here and it's really nice to see at least one other Australian on the call. So I wanted to start by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands I am standing. I'm in Brisbane, so I'm paying respect to the Turrbal and Yagara peoples and to their elders past and present. So starting with the, yes, that's working. Okay, so we have, I think I mentioned this last time, but just a quick recap that we have a national research infrastructure roadmap in Australia. And in that roadmap, it identifies nationally significant assets, facilities, and services to support leading edge research. It is the roadmap which has given birth to 23 different research facilities, one of which is the Australian Research Data Commons, to help build data infrastructure in particular to support research, and that roadmap's currently under review this year. So ARDC is one of those 23 facilities, and we are multidisciplinary and we are national in scope, and we basically build data infrastructure through partnerships with Australian research organisations and institutions. And as part of our national infrastructure, we have persistent identifiers. So the ARDC offers PIDs as national infrastructure. That's the way that we see it. We are the Australian data site DOI consortium lead, and we offer a bunch of other identifiers to the Australian research sector free of charge. And so these are the basis on which we look at what PIDs to provide. We look at national adoption and coverage of the use of the PID basically on a national scale. We look at the efficiency that it would bring to provide it at a national scale, and we look at the strategic national direction, both in terms of infrastructure and how these PIDs are useful in the research context. So where we're at since the last one is we've looked at, could the UK cost benefit analysis translate to Australia? So we talked about this last time, but if you haven't heard, there's a company called More Brains Cooperative in the UK who did a report called UK Cost Benefit Analysis of PIDs. And in that report, they found that the UK research sector could save £5.67 million over a 5-year period through investment in PIDs. And I will stress that it's a cost benefit analysis, in that the costs are taken into account of establishing a national PID consortium and concentrating on 5 priority PIDs for the UK. And if the adoption levels are reached for those, they would save that. So we're sort of thinking, well, what would that look like in Australia? And that equivalent for us is about $10 million. And however, there are differences in Australia from the UK, like the size of our research sector is different. The scale of investment in research in Australia is therefore different to the UK. The funding levels for research are different between the UK and here. And also the uptake and usage of persistent identifiers, we would need to benchmark that at the start of a survey to see where are we at, and then where do we need to go. And also in terms of, the availability and development of research infrastructure is another factor that we'd have to take into account, if we were to do that cost benefit here. So we also have asked, do we have the PID infrastructure needed? So in the UK, there are those 5 priority PIDs. And we've looked at, well, if we invested in something similar, or, what actually do we have? So here's a little table that tells you what we have. We have the Australian Orchid Consortium. So we have people identifiers, pretty well covered here, actually. We have, most of our Australian universities are members of the Orchid Consortium. It's been a sector-wide approach here on Orchid from the start. And so we've got very good Orchid coverage. I think we've also got good data site DOI coverage because ARDC has provided that service since about 2012, 13 or something, when it first became available through data site. And has offered DOIs free of charge. So I think we have good coverage there. We also offer RAID, the identifier for research projects, which is also one looked at in the UK. We offer a grants service for our funders, although that's currently a Pearl service, and we'd like them to transition over to DOI, so there'd be a bit of work there. You can see there's sort of slow raw adoption here too, and some questions around the ability of raw to provide identifiers for research facilities, not just the top level organizations, and how we actually make that happen. So it gives you a bit of a view. And we also said, well, do we have a national PID strategy that would support this? Well, we do have the research infrastructure plan and roadmap. We do have an ARDC persistent identifiers policy, which is essentially a national scale policy. We do have ARDC PID guidelines for our co-investment projects. So we say, if you're going to co-invest with us, you have to use these particular PIDs to actually specify that. And we do have different sort of governance groups for PID infrastructure, but we don't have a sort of single agreed upon approach to a national strategy. So this is just the last slide, just giving you a summary of where we're at. So we are going to invest in a PID cost benefit analysis for Australia through More Brains, using a similar sort of methodology to what they used in the UK, with some potential variations in that people here are particularly looking at identification and tracking of research instruments and research facilities. So we'll see how that kind of factors into the equation. And we're in a very early days conversation really about the National PID strategy. And I think there's a bit of a sense here from some people, from quite a lot of people maybe, that ARDC has already got that sorted. We've already got that sorted between ARDC and the Australian Access Federation providing Orchid. So, I'm not sure people are seeing quite the urgency around that. However, we would like to have that as an official kind of agreed upon approach. So that's it from me, and I will hand back to Chris for Mark's presentation.
Thanks, Natasha. Yep. Let me just load up Mark's and.
Thanks, Natasha. And I apologize for calling on Chris to change the slides, but I figured it would be easier than scripting. Next slide. So very briefly, the substantial change since our last BOF is that the Government of Canada created a new organization. On our last meeting, it was called the new DRI organization. It's now called the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, or the Alliance. So we have our final official name, and it's a combination of some existing data management, research software, and advanced research computing organizations that are transitioning to come under the Alliance umbrella. Next slide. And just to highlight, this is no different than any other organization's vision and mission. And I see I'm still not used to saying the Alliance because the title says Embryo. So I won't read that vision and mission. The slides are linked to in our notes document. But it's clearly to support best practices in digital research infrastructure. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this one. This is here for people's interest, and it just shows over the last year in particular the outreach effort that the Alliance has undertaken to hear back from the broader community, and it's currently rolling that feedback into a strategic plan, which will help us go forward with our investment, which is shown on the right. Annual investment plus match from the Canadian provincial and institutional context. Next slide. So 2 of the PID focused submissions, and those 2 titles in the slide deck are linked, are listed here. One was a PIDs in Canada position paper penned by Eugene Barsky at the University of British Columbia. And the second one was drafted by John Aspler, who's with the Canadian Research Knowledge Network. And that's both are available for people to take a look at. And they essentially proposed and recommended that the Alliance support the use of best practice PIDs in the Canadian landscape with funding support as well as other kinds of support. And if you're interested, the full list of 100 and some position papers is linked to at the bottom of the slide as well. Next slide. So those 2 position papers, as well as this, it's been about a month or 2 months now, position paper that the Alliance itself created, called the Current State of Research Data Management in Canada. So the link to the report is there, but it also talked about best practices, including PIDs, and highlighted what was happening in the Canadian context. So that's all background. Next slide. And that kind of outreach and the various documents that came before the Alliance have resulted in a set of objectives and initiatives. There's 30 some objectives and 200 and some initiatives. And I just extracted the ones that were specific, as I mentioned, to best practices for data management. So you can see clearly that the Alliance has recommended or proposed a set of initiatives, including one to develop and adopt a national strategy for PIDs. Improving information management systems by supporting the integration of PIDs in all Alliance managed infrastructure and programs. And here I should highlight that the Alliance is both a funder, a national funder of research infrastructure, as well as a service provider, either through its own resources or through support for partners. So this that kind of support for PIDs in the infrastructure could come through either one of those 2 means. And then the development of a cohesive national data governance set of policies, and I put in the one regarding supporting the implementation of FAIR for Research software principles, which include elements of PIDs, and we've actually added FAIR and the FAIR for RS principles, as well as others like CARE into our first funding calls, which are coming up in a month or so. Next slide. And I think this is the last one. And just to highlight next steps, the CPIDAC, which is what we call the Canadian Persistent Identifiers Advisory Committee, which is hosted and supported by the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, is a recent combination of the Orchid and DataCite advisory committees. It has a very robust membership, pretty much most of the national funders, some provincial funders, universities, scholarly comms organizations, including international reach ones like PKP, and national DRI organizations like the Alliance and Canary. And we're just in the process of making a decision on RFP to hire a consultant to develop a more detailed roadmap for our national PID strategy. And we're looking for that to be delivered in April of next year. And was put on hold over the summer, but we also have a version 2 of a persistent identifiers kind of report, current landscape and future trends. So our intention is to update that as a version 3 when the roadmap is completed. So CPIDAC is acting as a driver, but clearly other organizations in Canada like CRKN are facilitating the efforts, and the Alliance is, if you can imagine, is essentially supporting those efforts. Next slide. I think that's it, Chris. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. So if anyone has any questions, please just put them in the chat and we'll get to them between presentations. I haven't seen any, but please put them in if you have any. So Jessica, you're up next for Finland.
Thanks. Okay, so I have just like one theme in my slides, but maybe as a background, I could say that as I told last time, we have maybe a bit of a different approach we've had in Finland, as we're trying to build very strong cooperation with the GLAM sector, so the libraries and the archives, and also the rest of the government. So there's a governmental program now for open data and machine operable open data and APIs and stuff, and so we've been also now starting to discuss with them that we should not only, they are talking very much about semantic interoperability, and so we have a nice interoperability platform and stuff, but we really wanted to also include the discussion about PID, so we invited them to our National PID forum once again. From the highest level of the Finnish government. And so that's a bit of a different approach, but still the research field is, of course, the most active and visible, maybe, and advanced. And we feel that, well, we hope, of course, that by having this discussion with the government, we can also, in the end, have open data from the government that really serves our needs for the research also. So, but since last time, else what has happened, as I was very inspired of the last plenary meeting and discussions we had there, and and all the nice strategies and like roadmaps presented. So we started our own discussion about a PID roadmap for Finland. And now this presentation, which I have here, is the output of a like 40 minutes brainstorming, or actually it wasn't a brainstorming, it was like a step like back casting workshop with some experts, and they haven't actually given much of the comments, and I've worked quite a lot with the material they came up with. So this is my suggestion based on our Finnish experts' view on the roadmap. So I would be really interested if you have some comments or thoughts on this. So first we started by creating a value proposition. So then we could start like backcasting from that. So this was the value proposition that we came up with like in a 15 minutes discussion. Information about objects is possible to find and trace in different channels and possible to link to now and in the future. So this was the the people could agree on this value proposition, I think. So, and then we started going backwards, that what needs to happen to achieve this state. And these were the steps which I have now like reorganized. So the first was to create engagement and promotion, like raise awareness, developing skills, building trust, and organizing the coordination work. So that was the first things that need to happen. Then the second was organizing management and sustainable funding. And then there were very many interesting different approaches in the breakout groups, but the main steps or important points, I think, were describing use cases, creating proofs of concepts, like really also realizing maybe some showcases, defining requirements for different objects and systems, agreeing on common practice, policies, ownership, and management regarding these things, and then the small detail with funding, which of course will end up, I suspect, the most difficult one. And then the third step or stage or thing was creating the actual infrastructure. And here there were like these kinds of aspects that to ensuring interoperability, building a resolver infrastructure, organizing the services, organizing support, and then seeing to distribution and dissemination. So this was my very short presentation. I'm happy to hear if you have any comments or thoughts on this from my more experienced or more creative colleagues here. Would be interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. It's really interesting. Right, Netherlands, Goel.
Yes, well, I haven't prepared slides, so I'm keeping it very short.
Okay.
Well, what happened since last time? Well, last time my colleague Clifford was attending the session, so I'm here. That's the first thing that happened. And next is that we identified some stakeholders that we wanted to take a seat in a PID advisory board that we were organizing. And they came together around June, and they are representing various stakeholders within the Netherlands. So we have the biggest research funder who is attending, who's taking place in the advisory board as well. And especially because they have delivered in May a PID strategy. So they have, so they gave their commitment, or they presented what they are willing to do when it comes to implementing PIDs and what kind of PIDs they are thinking about. And later, we also organized a workshop with everyone interested or involved in any kind of a PID, and asked them to share what the current status is of each of those PIDs and what their involvement is in those activities in the Netherlands. And the advisory board we have installed prepared a request, and since September we have a working group who is working on a first version of a national strategy or roadmap. And they are doing this based on use cases they have found most important, because we also had to scope this since the project is till the end of this year. So by the end of this year, we hope to deliver at least a part of the roadmap and use this as a conversation starter nationally. Just forgot to mention it, but for those who don't know SURF yet, we are the collaborative organization for IT in higher education and research in the Netherlands. And those are basically my updates so far on the national roadmap or strategy.
Thanks, Goel.
And if there are any other questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or reach out to me after the session.
Actually, there's a question there from Antonio Schrader, probably pronounced that wrong, saying, wonder if you've published or made available the outcomes of the workshop with the PID stakeholders, as they plan to do something similar in Germany?
Well, we asked them all just to prepare a few slides and then present it in the meeting we were organizing online. So we haven't really wrote a document or summary afterwards. So yeah, there's nothing to publish, but yeah, feel free to reach out and I can, share some experiences.
Yeah, thank you anyway. Thanks.
So I realized I missed out a question for Jessica, but maybe just if you could answer that in the chat or open the mic at the end. I just want to get on with the presentations. And I'm up next, so I'd like to get mine out of the way. So right, just share my slides. Okay, hopefully that's going to load. Great, we should be seeing that. So, yeah, I mean, yes, I'm going to give an update from the UK, and some of this you've heard about already. I'm not going to go through the whole timeline then, but I just really wanted to show you a sort of summary of the work that's been done since 2019. But I did go through this in more detail in the BOF, so please refer back to the slides for the BOF. But what I really wanted to highlight from that, yes, there was the PID roadmap report, and there's a link there. The project, which was UK PIDs for Open Access, which was funded by Research England for a lot of this work. And out of that, excuse me, the main things I want to point out is the Research Identifier National Coordinating Committee was established. We've had 2 meetings. The second meeting was yesterday, in fact. And that was more about the governance, which I'll talk about in a bit, and exploring the business case for multi-PID support consortium to lower the barriers for PID adoption. But as this is an update, I didn't really want to go over those again. What I really wanted to talk about the work that's followed on since we had this, the BOF, about building a business case for investment in PIDs. That's mainly around the cost-benefit analysis, workflows that are being published from this project, and the work supporting the RINC. So it's really focused on those 3 main things. But of course, in the UK, I mean, Natasha, about priority PIDs, I mean, we've got these priority PIDs. In the UK, we have the UK Orchid Consortium, so that's pretty well established for quite a few years now. But the priority PIDs that came out of that roadmap work were the grants, outputs, people, organisations and projects. I'm highlighting the 2 there, not just because Jis is the consortium lead for the UK Orchid Consortium, but also there's the work mentioned on RAID. So we've had conversations with Natasha about RAID for projects. So there's ongoing work on that's changed since the last meeting. So the RINC has been established, like I said, 2 meetings. But it's not just about getting people together to have meetings to talk about how great PIDs are. It's really about providing this sort of strategic insights, trying to shape the priorities and focus PID-related activities and policies from the UK through this sort of governance structure, and liaising with national and international PID providers, and aligning the PID integrations developments across sectors, because we're trying. I mean, the focus is adoption and adoption and integration, and obviously interoperability across systems is important. We want to give everyone equitable access to the PIDs they need. So we feel that setting up the RINC is a way to do that, and that can help with the developing the case. I'm not saying we have a national PID support consortium, because we don't. We're developing the case for one, and then what that could provide is technical implementation support, outreach, education materials, guidance, best practice and workflow support. So, I mean, we talk about national PID strategies. Can I say the UK has a strategy? I mean, we have elements of a strategy, but we're trying to develop a PID strategy with all these different parts to, like I said, to target interventions to reduce the barriers to PID adoption. So that's ongoing work. So that's not really established as such. But the main thing I really want to talk about was cost-benefit analysis, which Natasha's mentioned. And in fact, I've seen, not putting Phil Jones on the spot, but one of the authors of that is there. So if you've got any detailed questions, hey, no, Phil. But there were 3 main areas of benefit identified in that analysis. The main one was metadata transfer. And there's this hidden cost of rekeying information. And there's a lot of potential savings from reducing that rekeying. And there's some figures there about the time spent on admin, which we want to reduce. So research, I mean, global research spend is quite a high figure. As you can see there, in the UK, these 2018 figures, 37.1 billion per year is spent on research innovation, which is 1.7 of GDP. I think it's up to 1.74 now. Well, it was in 2019, so it's slightly higher. So, there's a lot of money involved invested in research innovation, and every pound that's spent by the government on research generates £7 benefit. So even a modest increase in efficiency is going to generate these huge economic benefits. excuse me. So I think people have already posted the link in the chat to the consortium, sorry, the cost benefit analysis report from More Brains. And yes, there's that image again, which you've seen. So yeah, so sector savings should exceed 5.67 million with a sufficient adoption. But I want to stress those are minimum and based on lowest plausible estimates, because we wanted to have a report that could be hold up under scrutiny. And so we probably went a bit low, but that's the minimum. So they're potentially much greater than that, and the benefits of adopting and integrating PIDs is beyond the time and the effort saved. So there's wider economic benefits. They should be, but they're not going to be evenly distributed unless we have comprehensive adoption across the sector to realise those benefits. But we need strong leadership and sound community governance within the UK to reap those benefits, and of course adequate resourcing, which basically comes down to funding to do that. So it's a small investment for a large return. So we feel there's a solid business case for that UK PID support consortium, but it does require strong leadership and community buy-in to be successful. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details of cost benefit analysis, but the report's got a great summary and there's highlights in there, and it's one of those outputs from the UK that could be reused by the country. So I think it's one that could be put within the within this working group and within the guide, which we'll talk about in a bit. So there's also workflows coming out from this project, looking at PID optimized versions of funding, content publication, institutional research management, research data management. Again, these are sort of things that could be useful internationally for and reference within this working group and the outputs. So that's due for publication this month, hopefully. I haven't got a date yet, but I'm being optimistic saying this month. And finally, I know it's a bit detailed, but I just want to put in an extract from this open access policy, because UKRI has published open access policy, which is applies to publications that need to acknowledge the funding from UKRI and any of its councils. So this applies to peer-reviewed research articles submitted for publication on or after the 1st of April 2022, so that's very soon. I'm not going to read all that out. But what I want to stress is that, excuse me, that these requirements for journals and publishing platforms is persistent identifiers for articles must be implemented in there. Common unique PIDs for research management information, and quite key for us as UK Orchid Consortium is the Orchid research identifier must be supported to identify all authors and contributors. So that, like I said, I'm not going to read through all that, but that's an example of a policy in the UK where PIDs are being, you have to have PIDs basically, and orchids are being recommended and obviously mandated in that case with orchids. So that's really what I wanted to say from the UK, and I just want to thank More Brains for most of that content and all the work they've done for that project. So I'll rather than holding up Washington, I'll hand over to you, Washington. I'll just scan through the chat, and if there's any questions, I'll come back to them or answer them in the chat.
Thank you very much. I will share my slides. Let's see. Okay. Just a moment, I don't know how. Okay. So, oh, sorry. Something went wrong. Let me start sharing again. Sorry. Okay, so actually in Brazil, we don't have a national strategy for PIDs. But we have some projects that show that we need this strategy at the national level. I'm Washington Segundo from the Brazilian Institute of Information in Science and Technology, and I will show these projects or these programs that we have, and how we are using these PIDs to oscillate these systems and these information systems and these projects. First of all, we have this Oasis BR portal. That is a portal, a meta searcher that allows us to aggregate more than 2,007,000 records among data repositories, institutional repositories, journals, and electronic thesis dissertations databases. And Oasis BR is a node of a broader network of Latin America network named La Referencia. And Oasis BR is also a window to expose our national publications and data sets via La Referencia. La Referencia harvests our portal, as well as RICAP portal, that is a similar portal in the Portuguese context. And also, via La Referencia, we reach OpenAir, because OpenAir harvests La Referencia. And also, we have a national library of thesis and dissertations, a digital library of thesis and dissertations, that is harvested by the ND-LTD consortium, international consortium. And this are aggregating, this is aggregating a lot of Brazilian sources spread among the Brazilian territory. And the three types of sources that are exposed in this picture are the digital library of thesis and dissertations, local digital library of thesis and dissertations, the institutional repositories, and also the journals are the blue one. The red one are the digital library of thesis and dissertations, and the green are the institutional repositories. And as I said, we are aggregating more than 700,000 records, and this is some numbers of the kind of sources we are aggregating to this portal. We have a kind of a mirroring between RICAP and Oasis BR, because RICAP harvests us and we harvest RICAP to our portal. We also have 8 digital data repositories, but this is growing, as I will show in the next slides. So the past 2 years, we were involved in the group, a working group at the national level, at the umbrella of OGP, that the Open Government Partnership, and we had a compromise or a goal to establish scientific data governance mechanisms for the advancement of the open science in Brazil. So this was a very interesting group that expressed the idea of we need a national network of data repositories, and we advanced in this goal, as I will show briefly. But nowadays we are starting another compromise with this initiative, Open Government Partnership, to establish new assessment mechanisms for the advancement of open science. So this is just now in the course. And there are some documents, interesting documents that there are of evaluation systems in Latin America and the Caribbean, like this, specified by FOLAC. And I will present now the information system that intends to aggregate all the Brazilian ecosystem, research ecosystem. So it is named BR-CRIS, and it has a long history. Since 2014, we started this idea of creating an information system at the level of a CRIS, national CRIS. And we started studying the PIDs that we needed to use, and started some partnerships with national agencies, funders, and other important research agencies in Brazil. But only in 2019 we started implementing this system using the La Referência platform, that is a software provided by the La Referência network as a platform to aggregating not only repositories and journals and electronic databases, but also any type of scientific information source. We have also an interesting platform named the Platform Lattes, that is a profile, research profile database, and it has more than 7 million profiles of the researchers in Brazil. So it's a very interesting platform that we aggregated to BR-CRIS. B1 and other platforms like international ones like OpenAir Research Graph, and also the national in the national context Oasis BR and others. Here we are also working with the HOR PID for the organizations, and the Orchid for people, and also DOI for data sets and publications. So the idea is to map all the research context, Brazilian research context. We want the researchers, the funding, the researchers projects, research organizations, and the results of the research, like research data sets, patents, article, thesis, dissertations, and software, and so on. And the architecture of these systems, this system is we are using the La Referência platforms as a software to aggregate all the resources we have to put in this system. And from the La Referência platform, we are exposing it though APIs, semantic APIs, and also the dashboards and the Vivo on a Vivo instance, Vivo software instance. Here is the Vivo software instance test. We also have some tests and loaded tests in this platform with this architecture. Here's just some analysis, some network analysis about the collaboration network. Also, the Vivo provides these kinds of visualizations without any modification of the software. It is a default of the software. And we're also building dashboards using the Kibana software over Elasticsearch search engine. This is automatically exported by the La Referência platform, as we are aggregating all those fonts sources that I have showed. We also have dashboards for thesis and dissertations, for scientific publications, and we are building some dashboards for collaboration networks. So the PIDs here have an important role, because we need to build this research graph, and every node in this research graph needs a PID. So we have a semantic model for this ecosystem, and this semantic model was extended for the Brazilian context, like some exotic entities needed to be added to this ecosystem, like graduate program. That is a very Brazilian entity, is not the international context. And we have some fronts of action regarding journals, regarding organizations, regarding people, and for example, the identification of experts, regarding projects, and the connection between the funding and the research results, and also regarding the literature results, like articles, theses, dissertations, book chapters. We also have a front regarding patents, and finally research data. In research data, we built a tool that uses the open-air research graph for finding data sets that they are linked to Brazilian publications. And this strategy uses very strong uses the DOI of the publications and the DOI of the data sets to establish the links between these two types of results. Finally, we are building our own data repository, of a big repository, and we are supporting the creation of the CNPq data repository. That CNPq is the main national funder in Brazil. In this context, we established a consortium with DataCite that has nowadays just 4 institutions, but it's growing to 8 institutions beyond the incubating data repositories initiative that we launched last month. Finally, in the conclusion, we are trying to establish a solid infrastructure, because many times we started some projects that go to some point and need to be refactored. But now we are sure that we are going not so fast, but in a solid way. And also we are providing some showrooms of this kind of approach to show how all the infrastructure would be if it would be finalized. So thank you. It's just what I want to show, and I want to emphasize that the idea is we are very aware that we need to have this PID strategy at national level, because this ecosystem and this research graph that we're building needs all these PIDs for different kind of entities, and we are in this step right now. Thank you very much. Sorry for my broken English. I'm not so good speaker. I'm a good listener, but I'm not a good speaker.
This is a lot better than my Portuguese, don't worry.
Sorry for that.
No, it was excellent English.
I'm trying to improve.
No, it's excellent English. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I haven't seen any questions there. So I did have in the agenda about any other updates. So if anyone wants to just give a brief update from what's going on in their country, now's a good time to chip in. Just you can either raise your hand or open the mic. There's 24 people. So go on, Antonia.
Can start.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Antonia. I'm based in Germany, and just wanted to give you an update why I'm here and why I'm interested in working in this working group. So at the moment, and as I know so far, there's no PID roadmap or strategy in Germany, but I'm speaking in behalf of project Consortia, which is planning to do so. So our background is that we, at the moment, this project Consortia, which contains of one member of DataCite and also one member of our national library. We're working at the moment at supporting Orchid in Germany to support the adoption, and this is a very successful project. And with the end of the project, we thought about what can we do now. So we think about a very connected research world and looking over all the PIDs for people, and we wanted to see what PIDs are there in Germany, and also we want to try to establish to create a roadmap for Germany, a PID roadmap. And so I really interesting and hear your experience to do so, because we are at the beginning, we just think about that. And yeah.
Thanks, Antonia. Yeah, I mean that's the whole purpose of this working group, is to look at what's done internationally and what could be reused. Hopefully there's what we presented today and earlier in the BOF, there's a lot going on, and we can look at commonalities and try and coordinate some of these. So if you're starting out looking at, because I know infrastructure's come up a couple of times, and that's obviously very important. What's been done around roadmaps, what policies are there, what are the priority PIDs? Because the priority PIDs, I mean, that doesn't mean other persistent identifiers aren't important. Those are just the ones in the UK we've selected. In other countries, it may be different. Instruments in Australia, for example. I'm not saying those aren't important in the UK, but just you have to start somewhere. So if there's no, Jonathan, I don't know if you're first, but you're first on my list. So Jonathan, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a couple of things to say. One was, I saw there was a note on the PIDs for instruments. The way that's, at least so far, been implemented is there's a recommended metadata schema that I think EPIC has taken over and done. I know DataCite has implemented in some instances. So it's an object type that spawned a schema which the service providers are adopting. And so I think sometimes, and I also hear in the conversations a lot of like Crossref means articles. Well, actually, there's an awful lot of other content types of Crossref registers with DOIs, and that's typical for most, certainly for EPIC and other and URNs and pretty much all PIDs. They're not necessarily one-to-one linked with a particular content type. So that was just an observation I had, and we need it's important because you need to. It's a community thing, right? So if you're a publisher and you happen to be a member of Crossref and you have data to register, you're probably more likely to go to Crossref to ask them than to join DataCite and do it. And so there's two sort of drivers for registering your research output. One is the community that you feel you belong to, and the other is the technical specifications. So that was just one of the other thing I just wanted to see is that I miss EOSC here, and thinking that that's sort of, I mean, in a way they're developing it's not national, it's European based, but there's quite a lot of work gone on to define the PID policy, and there's ongoing work in the background. And I just wonder whether that begins to fall into the scope of this working group. And linked to that as well is the Fair Digital Objects movement. So that's also something that I think you might want to put onto your radar, because that's those two things are linked, but it's beginning to get a bit more traction. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to add that I couldn't attend the Birds of Feather meeting last time, so this is like a sum of.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jonathan. Yes, I should have mentioned, yes, because Jonathan chairs the PIDIG, the Business and Identifier Interest Group.
Sorry.
So we want to work closely with that interest group, because working groups tend to have a finite lifespan, and interest groups go on for longer. Not that's a simplified version of it, but whatever is produced by this working group, we can work with the PIDIG to sort of look at sustainability. I mean, we do talk about EOSC in the case statement. I have to admit, it's sort of we say, I mean, we will engage with EOSC. In particular, the PID policy work to ensure the working group's activities are aligned with the European PID landscape. So it's easy to say, but hardest to do. But that is on our radar. So we will be looking to do that.
Maybe invite Sarah or somebody from the EOS Secretariat to the next meeting. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right, fine. Carly, I think you were probably next.
Yeah, I was going to give a US update, but I didn't know if Jessica or Natasha wanted to kind of build off Jonathan's topics, because I was going to switch gears.
Jessica, put your hand down. Do you want?
Well, I can come back to what I wanted to comment on what Jonathan said, but it wasn't that important. So, but yeah, we can continue. Please go ahead, Carly.
Yeah, I'll wait, Carly. Just go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, I figured I could kind of give a US update, or maybe not much of an update, just to kind of where things stand. So I think in the US we have a very distributed approach, and so not a national strategy at this point. Although I will say there are a lot of coordination and a lot of conversations between US agencies. We have some kind of working groups where we, talk a lot about persistent identifiers and have a few kind of national consortia. So my office, the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Scientific and Technical Information, leads the U.S. government Orchid Consortium. So that's our national Orchid Consortium. I believe there are a couple of U.S. government data site consortia, but we lead one of those as well, where we're working with other U.S. agencies to assign data site DOIs. And we have also kind of launched an award DOI service. We're Crossref members in it, as well as data site members, and kind of assign Crossref DOIs to gray literature, and through our Crossref membership have started assigning award DOIs. So all of that is just to say, I find being a part of this group incredibly helpful and really exciting to kind of learn what everyone else is doing. So hopefully bring that back to kind of the US meetings. We've talked a lot about some of what was discussed today, to see, if there is potentially interest at a higher level to have a US national PID strategy at some point.
Thanks, Carly. Well, we like to think it is exciting. PIDs are exciting. So I'm not sure who is first. Jessica, do you want to go first?
Well, I could just say I'm quite involved in FAIR's Fair and the PID stuff that's done there, which it's an EOSC project. So I've been always struggling with, I would like to talk about the EOSC PIDs, but I've kept to the national perspective here, as I thought, but I think it would be valuable also to talk about the EOSC perspective as important. And the other thing was, I was also thinking about this, Jonathan said that people or organizations are struggling with choosing their PIDs, and there are many kinds of different reasons, and it's maybe not feasible to always have this very strict rules. And but somehow I personally would still feel it would be, I think that's not, it's also a bit of a problem, I think, because it's these are difficult things, and we have metadata schemas and that support different types of outputs in different ways, and users, both users and machines, I think would be served by the if it would be possible to like identify objects easily based on the PID, what they actually stand for or how they work. So that's, I think, an interesting and difficult question. And yeah, so just some thoughts, but we could, yeah, please Natasha, continue with something more structured as well.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jessica. Also some rambling thoughts. In addition to EOSC, you know, we also have GEOSC, the Global Open Science Cloud. And I'm a co-chair of one of the working groups for that on data interoperability with Milan Oystershek, who was here just earlier. I think he's gone now. But obviously PIDs have come up in that context. And one of the things that we're looking at there is not just the coverage that we have, but also the coverage that we don't have. You know, so what the countries that we don't know, what, you know, we haven't really focused on in these types of forums, you know, like there's a large China contingent from China in the Global Open Science Cloud, and that's a really interesting angle to explore. And I know from my role on the data site community engagement steering group in Asia Pacific, you know, KISTI in Korea are their own DOI registration agency. It's not DataCite or Crossref at all. Same in Japan, they have their own registration agency. Same in China. So, you know, there's a broader context that, you know, and I don't know how far we can go into this. I think this is as much as people here can contribute, but it'll be really interesting to see. This is sort of what we do know, and these are some black box areas that we might want to find out a bit more about as well.
Jonathan, you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond directly to Natasha, and I put a note into the chat for Carly. That's exactly our experience, is these nesting of memberships where an organization is a member is both a peer and a member of each other. Those things for us in the beginning, we struggled with it, but in fact, they've been the drivers of almost all useful interoperability things. So the fact that KISTI is a really good example. There are others, the Japanese JALC is a DOI registration agency, but they also are members of Crossref and can assign Crossref DOIs, and a member of DataCite and can assign DataCite. And so the result of that is there's a real integration and an understanding, because the social infrastructure is stronger. So this sort of nesting of consortia and members of members, I think is very powerful. It sort of happened. I don't think anyone planned it. It happened because it seemed like a good thing to do. But the more I see it, the more I see useful things coming out of it.
Thank you. In the agenda, we talked about walking through the case statement. Probably not going to do that in 21 minutes, but the case statement is there, and I provided the link, and it's linked to from the working group page. If you haven't signed up for the working group, please do. And please leave your comments. The two things I did want to mention from the TAB Technical Advisory Board feedback for the first version of case statement. One of those was because in the 0 to 6 months period, the first 6 months of this working group, I'll just read it out. It says, well, it changed. The one thing that did change, it was a report, and it's now a guide. So it's mapping common activities across national agencies' efforts and deliver a guide on the specific PIDs adopted in the context of national PID strategies. This will help others, irrespective of geographical region, follow a blueprint to defining their national PID approach. So that's really what we are planning to do in the first 6 months. The other feedback from TAB was that we should involve the Global South more. I know there are some members from Asia on the working group. I don't think they're here. Maybe they might be actually here. Sorry. So we know we need to do more on that. So if anyone has ideas on that, I think that's an ongoing issue with other activities I'm aware of, because we I guess in danger of talking about the things we do in the global north and not being fully inclusive internationally, which we want to avoid. Obviously, we want to be inclusive. But obviously, in the first 12 months, it's seeking community input to agree on PID categories, define common metadata and standards for PIDs, define a minimal set of PIDs for international interoperability, provide example ideas on governance and common workflows. The last 6 months is about completing the community consultation, finalising the agreement on the report for that national case studies. So the PID categories, common metadata and standard for PIDs, a minimal set of PIDs. So there's a lot of information we're going to have to gather from the various countries, mostly from the presentations we've had. Obviously, there's work going on in other countries. It's not just restricted to those. I don't want to feel we focused on those. It's just the way it's happened, really, with links and various links with projects and knowing various people. So we want to include as many other people as possible, and also, as Natasha put, yes, co-chairs from other regions of the world, to make it fully inclusive and share it a bit. So, because I don't suggest we go through the whole case statement because we haven't got time, but please do, if there's any more feedback on that case statement, because there is a plan in there, but plans aren't fixed in stone, are they? So once we start, it can be adapted. So we're open to ideas. We want to deliver something that's useful for this working group. We want to work with other groups, other organisations, fair groups, EOSC as well. So we want to get those people involved as much as possible and produce useful outputs. And as I mentioned briefly at the start, we're planning to do that sort of a couple of sprints to produce that guide over the first 6 months. So hopefully, so I'm trying to read the chat as well as talk at the same time. It's always a bad thing to do. So hopefully there's a lot for us to get involved in, but yeah, we do need input from people because it can't just be Natasha and me doing it.
Chris, Mark has got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Mark, missed that one. Thanks you, Mark.
It's hard to keep track of all the areas in
I was scrolling the messages at the time then, sorry. Over to you.
I know this, Chris, but what's the status of the case statement? It's been submitted.
It was submitted to TAB and they reviewed it and it accepted it with just those 2 changes, which I put back in, and there's a version 2 on the side. So as far as I'm concerned, that it won't be changed again. The feedback I was saying on the case statement is about adapting the plan for the group. So the working group hasn't been officially endorsed, but the changes have been made for the requested by TAB.
So that would go back to TAB, which would then indicate to the council that the TAB has approved it, and then council provides the final endorsement. So that should happen in the next month or 2, I would say.
I'd hope so, yeah. I mean, I was probably a bit optimistic that it'll be done in time for this meeting, but yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, the final part of the agenda was about, excuse me, looking at, well, it's a PID strategies, priorities, commonalities, divergence. What PID policies are there at national level? We've talked about that a bit. Infrastructure. And those people haven't filled out any of the landscape survey. I mean, calling it a landscape survey, but we hopefully just collected that in this meeting. But if anyone has any links to any information, please add it to that. But really, I'm opening the floor for anyone to input on the case statement, what we're planning to the working group. Is it not clear what we're trying to do? Are there any other groups we've missed out? I mean, in the case statement, we do list some of the other RDA groups we need to work with. I mean, PID's touch on a lot of things. GEOSC has been mentioned as well. There's the PID group. Basically open the floor for any input on the case statement, the work group, or what's been presented. If anyone has any questions or anything to say about the work of the group.
Just Chris mentioned it, but just as an additional prod, because I guess that's the color of my personality. Anybody on the call that would like to consider stepping forward as an additional co-chair to join Chris and Natasha?
Clearly, we're very scary people. So. I know everybody has a lot on, so can totally understand why we don't have people rushing forward for this, but it would be really nice to get some more diverse country representation than UK and Australia in the co-chairs. It's like in one of my other groups, we have 4 co-chairs, and that's quite good, you know, from all different countries, and that's quite a good balance.
So,
I mean, you can go away and think about it.
okay.
Sorry, Sean. Sean, no, sorry, if you're going to volunteers, shut up. Go ahead, Sean.
Obviously, I'm with the PID, not a country, so that's why it was my hesitation. But of course, I'm happy to help. So if that's okay, please consider my my hand up.
Brilliant, thanks. So I didn't want to stop people coming forward. I just didn't want, I want people, time to think about it if they want to check commitments.
Yeah, I think it would be fabulous. Yeah, thanks, Shauna.
I mean, this session, as I mentioned at the start, is going to be repeated on Tuesday in what's officially breakout 9, 2300 to 0030 UTC. So that's well, for me, that's 11 p.m. at night to 12:30 in the morning. So that's Tuesday the 9th, goes into the 10th. So hopefully we'll get more people coming to that. I'm not expecting people to come to it twice, unless they really want to. But we may get other volunteers, of course.
I think maybe it's worthwhile mentioning that the difference here between a working group and an interest group, because it's not always very clear if you haven't been in RDA. I think a lot of people here have been in RDA for a while and know that, but there is a difference just in terms of the speed of things at which we get done through a working group, and the fact that we actually have a plan of things that the working group is going to produce as it has outlined in the case statement. So, there will be a schedule to this, and we will kind of move ahead with it just based on that plan. Don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Mark, from your experience in RDA with working groups, etc.
No, I mean, you've highlighted more hands in the co-chair role is really helpful. Participation obviously is the key, and Chris highlighted the main goals of the working group, intersection with the other PID focused working groups, as well as some of the external ones that have been mentioned, like OSC and FDO. So no, I think for me, sometimes the key is the activity that happens in the middle. The icing in the Oreo cookie, as it were, typically two annual plenaries. So that's the part where I think the co-chairs can create a context or framework where the members can weigh in, provide updates, on a regular basis, have whatever it's monthly or every other month meetings. I know the PID instrument group is pretty active and has regular meetings as a good example. So that's another aspect of this that is useful.
Yeah, we'll have to give that schedule some thought. I guess as I said to Chris, I was in favor of sprints for this, so that we have a time set aside where, for 2 weeks, we're going to do some work on this as co-chairs, and then we're going to take it to a meeting of the group, and then have a break, and then do another sprint, come back to the group again. So we keep refining what we come out with, but we have sort of set periods at which we're going to make this a priority in our work, because otherwise it could just kind of drag out for a long time. So this is sort of having a concentrated time to do this, and then a group just input.
Yeah, that's a really good approach. And I don't think RDA would have completed the COVID-19 working group outputs in the time it did, which was like 3 or 4 months, but also at all without a sprint approach. So that's a really good suggestion. I would support that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we will be updating what we're doing, obviously, through the working group. So if you haven't joined, please sign up, and then we'll communicate that. So, you know, you don't have to commit now, but we'll keep the working group informed of those sprints and any updates, any meetings that we're running, and communicating, you know, with any, as we're developing the guide, sharing that through the working group, through the mailing list. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to input, rather than, you know, presenting at a plenary, going away, doing stuff, coming back to the next plenary and giving an update. You know, obviously there will be updates at the plenary, but there'll be opportunity to contribute to the group, get involved in discussions, and those sprints, as Natasha's already mentioned, particularly in the first 6 months for developing that guide. Trying to read the chat. I think it's just a discussion. I don't think there's any particular questions, but if I've missed anything that anyone wants to actually ask us a question, please feel free to unmute and ask it. I see Jonathan just giving involved a discussion there, which is fine. But I mean, if you want to open up the mic, and feel free.
It's kind of like being in a coffee shop where you're sort of hearing someone else's conversation, but you didn't quite catch it.
I think it was getting a bit deep into fair digital objects. I wasn't sure
Yeah.
it was really super relevant for really interesting, but not quite relevant yet.
Yeah, a bit off topic maybe here in this context.
Good though, I was enjoying it.
Yeah, really. Me too.
I wonder if it might be informative for all the, particularly the speakers who have talked about their own national PID strategies, what lessons have been learnt sort of along the way. It strikes me that these things are actually pretty big endeavors, and it seems like they've, certainly with working with JISC, isn't this true, Chris, that it's sort of, the more that we've done, the more we've realized that it's a bigger problem and a bigger problem and a bigger problem. So it's quite an endeavor to get this thing started. And I just, you know, a couple of folks are interested in sort of following in the same footsteps as some of the leaders in this have done. So I wonder what sort of lessons folks would say. You know, what's the warning that you would give to folks who are just starting, other than don't do it? You know, what lessons have been learned?
I wouldn't say don't do it, Phil, but I would say it's bloody slow. And I don't know if it's a Canadian thing or what it is, but you know, I remember doing a presentation, must be 10 years ago, on a national PID strategy, and kind of crickets for a couple of years after that, and then slowly things start to work. So there are elements of it being because the Canadian context is often slow, but for me that's probably the main warning I would make, is it's a slow burn in my experience. So the efforts of groups like More Brains and ARDC and JISC and the others that are kind of, and Brazil is doing some great stuff. So having those models, I think, helps to move people, you know, where it's slightly competitive landscape where, you know, when we see somebody do something, it either inspires us or puts a little fire under the group to get moving. So general comment.
Mine would be start with the problem and get the right people in the room. You know, that's essentially how we got the Orchid Consortium up in Australia, which has been hugely successful. As we went, what problem? We all have a problem. We can't persistently identify researchers and link them to their works, and it's causing havoc with our funders, with our institutions, for our researchers. And we got people at quite a high level, senior people in a room to talk about that problem, and connected them with Laurie Hack, who was then executive director of Orchid, who we flew out to be at that, and said, well, this is what Orchid does. Should Orchid be the solution? You know, and without forcing it on people. And that's kind of how people arrived at that decision of, well, yes. And I remember being in that meeting and people said, well, to the funders, can you now mandate Orchid, please? And they said, no, because we don't mandate, and you wouldn't be ready even if we did. And everyone went, oh yeah, we've got to get a consortium together and do all that integration stuff. So that's how it came about.
Jessica, you had your hand up, but then you took it down. Did you? No? Okay. I was going to say something.
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right. Did you want to say something?
No, I tried to give thumbs ups to the question.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sorry, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yes, I think part of the problem is that sort of infrastructure problem. PIDs aren't sexy enough sometimes. I mean, we talk about the same people, the importance of PIDs, but I think getting that approach to setting that sort of importance of PIDs to people at a high level in funding organizations, they may not see it because it's sort of the thing that, you know, it isn't a new bit of software that they can see, and it's, you know, so I use the word sexy again, but, you know, there's important stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make things work that doesn't, you know, and if it didn't work, people would be upset about it, and they only get upset when things don't work. They don't necessarily realize the importance and put the funding in. I think, and on things like policies where, you know, even if you mandate something like Orchid, you're telling people you've got to use an identifier, but then, you know, well, you're not giving them the support they need necessarily to adopt those identifiers or implement them. So it sounds a bit negative, but I don't mean it to be negative. I just think sometimes you've got to sell it better to the right people high enough in the relevant organizations to understand the importance. And also having a roadmap, I think, is quite key, because obviously you can see the destination. And we did a bit of work which was mapping the PID landscape, which was good because it was showing what was there and what was missing. And obviously having the landscape maps and the road maps all links together quite nicely. So having that sort of mapping where you are, what you haven't got, and where you want to be is also.
I think we've got 2 minutes left.
2 minutes left. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, waffling on. Jonathan, do you want to make a quick point because we've got to wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to double down on what you just said. There were two use cases that I've seen be very powerful. One is to the funders. How can you track the impact of your funding through the research world? So what are all the outputs that are related to your piece of funding? And that was very powerful in signing up funders for Crossref's initiative, but others too. And the other one that I heard, there was a guy, I think it was a Pidapalooza. He was required in his funding, in his grant request, to list all his publications, and he didn't quite have it in order. But because he had an Orchid, and because he could map the Orchid to all his outputs, he could create that very easily and quickly, and it saved him a lot of time. And that was a really powerful use case that resonated with a lot of researchers. So I think they're there. We just need to maybe generalize them or get those people in front of the skeptics. But there are some powerful use cases out there. That's it.
Well, hopefully, yes, we need to wrap up now. But hopefully, what we're going to do within the working group is going to, you know, be beneficial for lots of countries. That's the plan. But I'd just like to thank everybody for coming along. Thank you for presenters. Like I said, we will repeat this session, and there is a recording available, and links to all the slides will be in the notes. And obviously, we'll share that within the working group. So as it's just hit 3:30, or probably quite early in the morning for Natasha. Thank you to everyone, and be in touch with you through the working group. So bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.